Yes. I have come in at the last minute, so strap yourselves in. I'd like to begin by just handing the floor to each of the very talented leaders in their own field here and getting them to talk to some of their current work, because I think one of the best things we can do in terms of advocating for trans, female voices and non-binary voices is actually give people the opportunity to talk about what they're doing and promote their work. So if we can start with you, Amy.
Oh God, me?
Yeah, go on.
I'm doing everything. I'm doing burnout. No. I'd also just like to start off by acknowledging country and where we're on as well, just to sit and gather for the new day together here on Gadigal lands. I'm a visitor here. My mum is from Wiradjuri country out west, but I was born on Biripi and Warramai country, had a deep family and community ties there. But I'm actually up from Naarm because I'm Melbourne based. I work full time at Ilbidri Theatre Company. Yeah. So most of my work at the moment is company-based things, but I am doing, the everything. What else am I working on? I'm about to start rehearsals for White Valley Yellow Tree next week on Monday with the phenomenal Declan Green, written by Dylan Vandenberg. Yeah. I think I do too much. I think I do too much to actually answer that question, and I think everyone knows that. I think you're going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Burnout is actually true. That's exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, burnout and mental health issues is what I'm doing, and I don't think anyone talks about that. Like, I've got work, and I'll get to that, but like, burnout and mental illness is always coinciding with being the busiest person in this industry, and especially I think if you're not a cis white straight man, it's also burnout to try and be able to just keep working and keep getting money in this industry as well. So I write and act, I produce, and I'm doing that at the moment. So next year I'm working with Riverside on this program that I have that's called the Monologue Collective, which is where, cute. We love young people. I'm a young person, I guess, sort of, I don't know. So I'm doing that with Riverside and Create New South Wales, put up the money, so we love that. And we're going to do a Western Sydney edition of that, because I'm from Western Sydney, and get a bunch of teenagers to develop monologues for Year 12 students for their HSC performances. So that next year, and I'm doing a first draft commission with Belvoir on a lesbian soccer play.
Yay.
So that's cool. So it's first draft. I'm really scared. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but I don't know. The contract didn't say that. I don't know. But it's really cool. I'm really scared, and I'm doing a bunch of other things as well, but I can't remember at this moment. So yeah. So chaos.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Courtney. I really resonate with everything that both of you have said.
Feminist theatre is burnout, is that?
I think so. I'm currently the artistic director and CEO at Le Bois Theatre in Meanjin in Brisbane. So I'm here today travelling from there, so super grateful to be part of the conversation. I think being inside an organisation is so challenging. It's so challenging. I think it's always been challenging, but it feels particularly challenging now. And I think it feels particularly challenging to be in that space in a leadership capacity while occupying all the different intersections that make up my particular lived experience and identity. So I'm a mum. I have two very, very young children, and trying to navigate that with all the things. Yeah, I think that equals burnout. And I think, but I say all of that to say that I think we probably all agree that what we're doing feels like the most meaningful work of our lives. I'm currently working with the amazing Merlin Tong on her newest play, Congratulations, Get Rich, which opens in 2 weeks. And I think, my life's work to this point has really been about as the same as both of you, I think working on new Australian writing and figuring out what the new Australian canon can and should include and how we do that. Yeah, I love both of you.
Thank you. One of the questions I was asked by Deborah when she asked me to do this panel was, could I speak to some of the challenges I've had, and that they wanted someone who was, I'm in my 56th year of life, I'm not shy about that, who has experienced some battle wounds from when times were less equitable. I don't want to throw any theatre company under the bus, but I would like to speak to 2009 when a main stage theatre company announced their 2010 season and had 13 men on stage and 1 woman at the end. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this was that it was a young, emerging female playwright that went home and blogged about it. And that was what started the catalyst for the 2012 paper that inquired into the status of women in theatre. The year after that, 2010, I'll just give you some statistics so you get an idea of the kind of ecosystem back then. Only 24% of plays were written by women. So the glass was definitely under a quarter full. 86% of plays that were being produced by the main stage theatre companies were 86% of them either had a male playwright or a male director in that position. And that playwright, I think it's really good to acknowledge the people that we stand on their shoulders. And I was reading about Joanna Erskine yesterday, and it broke my heart that one of the things she said was, I was terrified and I felt alone. Anyway, if you're here, Jo, we're very grateful that you started a very big ball rolling, because I remember at that time I was in my late 30s and I did definitely feel a change, and things went up and down. And the first thing I noticed was there was an amazing flurry of programs and awards. And I'll just leave you with this thought. In the mid-2000s, I got a lot of awards. I'm not boasting because none of them got put on. They were blind red and they won, but they didn't get put on. I think, though, it was round about 2009 where people started being very cognizant of counting and noticing and taking agency about the inclusion of women. And at that point, trans women, non-binary, people who identified with non-binary, it wasn't even in the conversation. So I just think it's good to note all of that. I wanted to turn to Courtney, because I think this would be a really useful conversation, a really useful question for the playwrights in the audience. When it comes to programming, could you talk about how equity and inclusion works and some of the misconceptions around it, and just the reality of when you're sitting in the room reading plays, how it works, and what's important to you?
It's such a great question, and I think you have to be, as someone who has the responsibility of pulling together a constellation of a season, you have to be so aware of how all of the parts make up a whole picture all the time. You can't ever switch that off, because if you switch it off, you run the risk of kind of sitting left or right of where you want to be. And I think for me and the way that I program and the programming pillars that I've put in and around Le Boite, I actively look to disrupt what has kind of held the majority for the years and years that Le Boite's been around particularly. And I think that comes from the spaces that I've occupied as an artist kind of coming up in this industry. And I think the conversations and the colleagues that I have and the conversations we're having about the work that's exciting us and what's the next conversation that we want to be having, not only in the sector, but as a as a place that calls itself a nation. Like, I think we need to be unified in the way that we, dream and have ambitions for where we want the people here to be thinking. And I think when I started at Le Bois, it was a really, really rocky time at the company. There hadn't been an artistic director there for 2 years, and and I was a baby leader. And I think I was like, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this job, and there's no blueprint. Like, how do I do this? I felt like I was, reading an IKEA manual on how to assemble a plane while trying to drive. It was really, really scary. But I was like, the thing that I need here, because there's so much, this is make or break. This is where if I don't stay plugged in and switched on in this moment, everything could fall apart. I could lose myself, I could lose my values, all of that could go by the wayside. And I think for me, that's so important. I think being a values-led artist and leader is so important to me. So I think when I got to Le Bois, one of the first things I did was figure out a programming framework that would live and keep developing as I got more information. I learnt more about my job and the industry and the sector in Brisbane. And so there's kind of three kind of elements that have ended up being my North Star in terms of pulling together our program year after year, and that is considered collaborations. Who are we collaborating with and why? Not only just from company to company or company to audience or, that kind of bigger picture, but what artists should be making work together? What are the great conversations that could be happening when you put this awesome person with that awesome person that never made work together before? So how do we make sure considered collaborations run throughout the entire fabric of the work? How do we also create opportunities for that work to start to create collaborations with the sector and other sectors? What's that? How do we continue to make sure that our art form continues to be relevant beyond, us? Authentic representation and what that means, and that 3 years ago that was a particular conversation, but what does that mean now? And I think there'll be a panel later today that talks about how do we tell particular stories, who should be telling them and why. And so that question's just always there. Someone might come with with an amazing idea for a story, but I think just picking under the surface as to why are you, what's the reason, and having that conversation, that's so important. That's so important. And also knowing I have a particular lived experience, and so it's not just my taste or my opinion on whether that person is qualified or not to tell that story, but I think engaging that conversation is really, really important. Right from the beginning, because then you can understand where the ideas come from and how the story is going to be lensed, and that's important when you're speaking to it from a marketing perspective and how you're putting the messaging of that story out beyond just the people who know the work intimately. So there's that, and fresh perspectives. I think when I first started, there were lots of artists who I wanted to meet because I hadn't been back in Brisbane for 8 years. I'd been here. And so trying to figure out who was making what, why they were making the work they wanted to make. And it was really interesting, the number of artists that I had known kind of coming up in the industry still on that same idea from 15 years ago. And I was like, okay, what's the next, why now? Why would we tell that story in 2025? Considering all the issues that we as human beings are facing, navigating, trying to constantly find our way back to each other. I think trying to find ways to connect with one another is so important. And how does that story either add to that effort, distract us from that effort, or something else? So they're the kinds of things that I've been thinking about and navigating. And it's really hard. I mean, we thrive on collaboration and co-productions, and sometimes the work we're really passionate about is just not commercial enough for the bigger companies that we want to work with. So that can be really challenging, trying to square programming ethics and values and taste. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a really great answer. One of the things that I found interesting is how you talked about collaboration and pairing people up and what teams would work well. And I'm sure a lot of the playwrights in the audience have, often you can feel quite siloed as a playwright, and that you maybe don't have a lot of agency in who you get to collaborate with the creative in creative teams. And I'm just wondering if Lanika and Amy could talk about some of the collaborations that have been really great, and also when you found barriers to having agency in who you want to collaborate with.
Yeah, listen, I will never not have agency with who I'm working with. Like,
Good on you.
ever. I will never work with someone or be in a room with someone or collaborate with someone that I think that in any way, shape or form takes away my sovereignty or my agency. Like, I think that's the responsibility of myself as the next generation of Black leaders and artists, to be like, actually, there's a point in time when we stop swallowing ourselves and who we are to be in rooms, and I just won't do it. And because I have done it, I think that I'm very, very lucky that most of the people I work with, all of the playwrights I work with, I mean, I'm kind of now, because I'm inside of a company, I'm much more on the programming side now, so I'm much more on getting to work on the projects and with the people that I want to work with. Also, the artistic director of my company is Rachel Mazur. And so never would Rachel ever be like, would dictate a room that I would be in or an artist that I would work with. She would always give me self-determination. And I've been incredibly lucky to learn from that woman what leadership looks like. And I think that there are a lot of leaders in this sector that could use the same mentorship who are currently running companies and sitting on panels here. What was that? Anyway, I can't. But I've definitely. I think that when I turn up in space, when I'm working with anyone, and I think that this is what I do when I work with all of my artists. I run all of the development programs at Obituary. So the Black Rights program, the Black Stage program, and our ensemble program, which I reimagined over the last 3 years. And we just did Black in the Room with Melbourne Theatre Company at the end of last year. And as well, I was working with all of those artists, all of those emerging playwrights. Some, Isabel Murphy-Walsh, who's an incredible young playwright, who's now First Nations dramaturg in residence at Melbourne Theatre Company. It was her first time ever writing a play. It was her first time coming into theatre. So she's a TO from down there, and so she had been a cultural leader but was stepping into theatre for the first time. And for me, it was so poignant to be like, what are your ways of telling story? What is your form? What is your practice? When you're engaging with any other methodology or any other person, it's about the centering of your own practices and your own ways of being and doing. And I think that most people in this industry, especially from generations above, can speak to having to silo parts of yourself or disconnect parts of your practice, and it fundamentally affects the work we're putting out. It makes it shit. It makes it bad. If you have to cut off part of who you are to put on a work for commerciality because some people have anxiety, it's not going to be a great work, right? And I'm not saying that you become a diva in any way, shape or form. I'm saying it's about we move through this, as Courtney was saying, as a collective and through bravery to put our stories first. So when I was working with these 3 young writers, which was Isabel Murphy-Walsh, Phoebe Grainer and Muriel Spearham, who are all incredible playwrights, incredible Black women. It was 3 Black women that got programmed for that season. It was all about, as we start working with Melbourne Theatre Company, you're going to be starting to work with people that are not Black. Like, we're centering it in Black practice through as we're learning for the first 2-3 years of development. We're just going to be in a room with mob, and the people that come in know that they're working from our perspectives and coming in to work alongside of. And what I watched through that process, which was amazing and transformative, was the work not only great and wonderful and can keep growing, but every single one of those women and those playwrights learned to go, no. This is why it's in here. This is what it means. This is where it's centred to my cultural practice. This is where it comes from dramaturgically, and this is where it sits in Black theatre. Like that. Like if you can walk through spaces and understand who you are and have the autonomy to know the entirety of your practice, which is a privilege, it changes how you move in spaces with people. And I've been privileged enough so that now I can walk in spaces no matter who I'm with. I don't need to cut off part of myself.
I want to to go after that. That was really good.
Sorry,
I'm so awesome.
I so soapboxed that. It was just so important.
It is so important. Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, I'm not going to speak to that, but I think maybe I can answer the question.
You embody that. I've watched you embody that over your career. You do that, and you came up not with anyone kind of telling you to do that, but you did. You went, this is the theatre I like, this is the way I make work, these are the people I like, and I'm not going to back down. I watched you do that.
Aww. Well, I think in a like, I didn't go to uni. I wrote a play in high school, and I put it on at KXT in a storytellers festival, and then I met a director who liked it, but had very similar work to me. And at the same time, I was seeing theatre because I was doing things like, I was very lucky that I was able to go to like Griffin as a young person, and in the high school programs that they had, like I was lucky enough that I had a drama teacher who told me that was like a thing. So I was seeing theatre in my final years, and that's sort of how I started writing a play, because I just loved seeing it on stage, and I was like, oh, like I really like how these people are doing things that are like non-linear. And I know that sounds very basic, but at like that age is, really important. And that's sort of how I got into this, and I guess that's how I've learned to say what I want to say. But I think I might speak to it from an independent perspective, which is that it's so hard to form teams if you're just a writer and you're writing not because you're a commissioned writer or that sort of thing. And I'm the indie person through and through, independent theatre, great. I can hear you all. But what I would say to it is that to pick collaborators when you're someone who might not know many people, is that I think if you can try and see work and try and see free work through a comp of a friend, or try and find some actors and try and get some tickets to the theatre for independent level, and see people who you like the work of, and then go, oh, okay, have a coffee with them and see if they're like a real person who you would like to work with, and try and explain your vision to them and connect that way. But it is always a struggle to find people on that independent level to be able to connect,
In terms of when you have felt you've been in a situation where you've had to push forward for your agency, or it's not just a room you walk in and it's a given, if I could wave a wand and reference some of the people that you were maybe referencing before in terms of giving female voices, trans voices and non-binary voices space in the room, particularly, I'm going to say, particularly men who are in leadership, what advice would you give them about what they can, one, what they can learn, and two, what curiosity they need? Can you talk to that?
Yes, I can.
All of you? I think Amy.
So go, Amy.
My number one advice for all of those men starts with, please get therapy. Please. That's it. It's such a simple request. Deal with your own stuff so that we don't have to. But actually though, no, but it's a genuine statement. Like, so many of these men who are gatekeepers, or so many of these people, because it's women as well, and it's non-binary people, anyone has the ability to be a gatekeeper, right? And I think that fundamentally the reason why people become gatekeepers is because they're scared. It's ego. They're terrified. They're so desperately wanting someone to validate them. The reason why Courtney isn't a gatekeeper is because she's an incredible woman who's done the work, and when she gets scared, she calls her friends and she calls the people she trusts and she calls the people in sector and goes, we're a team and we do this together. It's not about my hierarchy, it's not about my position of power, it's about our collective responsibility, and it is scary. Being on the forefront of things is scary, and you cannot do it alone. And so many of those people in positions of power who have become gatekeepers have had the pressure and thought they had to do it alone. They have to go, I am here, and I am strong, and I am making choices. And yes, you are. However, leadership is about a responsibility, and it's about sitting back and understanding the collective and leaning on the collective. It's just a role that you're playing, not in a hierarchy, but in a collective. So just therapy. Not saying any names. Yesterday's panel, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also just think that you don't have, and like obviously those people have power, but you don't have to give them power like, you don't have to give them the power that they have. Like, I was raised by a mum who was like, you just go up and you speak to someone. Like, oh, you, like, she's very boomer, but she's like, oh, you need something. You go up and you tell that man that you need something and that's what it is. But when I meet people, I meet everyone at the same level. And I'm very specific on, like, if I'm pitching a work, what my vision is. I know exactly what I'm trying to say. And I've done the work so that when I go and speak to these people, I don't view them as gods. I don't view them as anything that's scary. I view them as an equal who should want to collaborate with me. So I think we really, and writers are so scared of people. And I'm not saying that you should go up to every CEO and speak to them, because that's not a good idea either, because they can be whoever they are. But I'm saying that you should go in and know your worth. And if you know what your idea is, that's all that matters. And if they say no to you, cool, we're all going to die someday and they'll get said no to too. Like, you've just got to really believe in your vision and go to someone else.
I just wanted to, can I jump in on the back of that?
Yeah, you can.
Just because I do think that that's important. I do think that's important. But I do think that is also a privilege to be able to do that. And it's something that I'm really conscious of, because it's a privilege that I have. Mm-hmm. I have large amounts of hubris.
Yeah.
Don't know where it came from. Don't know. So I, even through my fear and insecurity and pain, I've been very good at speaking to power. Mm-hmm. But the ability to speak to power and the ability to be able to speak languages of those of people who aren't from your specific background is a very specific thing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm also very conscious of it. There's a lot of playwrights and there's a lot of artists who cannot do that, not because they don't know their vision, not because they don't know their idea, but because communicating the way that which they need to communicate and show up in the world is not the dominant and is not the dominant paradigm. And it is our collective responsibility as leaders to listen, to really listen and to give space to that. So props for those of us who can just walk up to people. I do it quite frequently.
But I will say I've not always been like that as well. I've felt like the depths of not being able to talk to someone and have extreme social anxiety, but yeah, it's just a battle of trying to get it, and it is a privilege.
I think yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. And I think in terms of advice, I feel like, not to really give advice, because I'm still learning, like I'm still like on my journey, but I think that a lot of the strange behaviour and strange decisions come from a scarcity mindset that they feel like, that people feel. I think when you feel like, oh, I've got to hold on to this thing and I can't share it too much, otherwise my relevance will go, that's where everything can fall apart. And I think if you relax into the fact that any opportunity, like, that's awesome, even if it's small, like, that's awesome, like, just love that just for that moment, and then like let it go. Everything changes. You just have to be like semi-detached, like detached enough to like really enjoy the moment and like enjoy the art that's being made, and that you get to witness it and be a part of it. And that's like enough. I think trying to hold on to it too tight kills your relationships, and then no one wants to be your friend.
No one does want to be. Yeah.
And then
they get sad when they have no friends.
And then there's like, and that's it. And then you go, like, you see it all the time. Like, people rise and then they're so great, and then no one like wants a bar of them, and then they're like knocking on the door later. It's like, just be cool.
Yeah. Like, I think that tight grip on the scarcity can create problems in relationship building sometimes. I was really interested, Amy, in what you when you talked about privilege and finding your way into rooms. And I'm just wondering, this is a question that I've often thought of. I think you look back and you see all the advances we've made and all the conversations that didn't happen that are happening now. I'm just wondering, and I'll throw this open to all the panel, what are the conversations and issues that are still being sidelined, and the subconscious biases that are you feel are still prevalent?
I mean, I obviously have a very specific lens. I'm an incredibly intersectional human. However, for me, first people's first means first people's first. And we haven't actually seen that. We haven't seen that embedded or implemented at all since that policy came in. Not at all. We've seen kind of like, we will slightly open the door and let in this one black work that we will kind of wrap a whole bunch of Western methodologies around, or we might do this one partnership with this black organisation and give it a like. So for me, it's obviously First Nations work, and like I've always stood really clear on where I stand on black work, which is black work is the paradigm. It's the centre. It's what has been here since time immemorial. It's our ways of telling story. We're not diversity and inclusion. We are the centre. And theatre and our theatrical voice should reflect that. Like we've got modes of, even the modes of black theatre over the last like 30, 40 years. Like our ways of telling story, our ways of telling theatrical story, which has also been borrowed and taken and shared, and all culture is all this, has also directly impacted how Australians tell stories. How much time I see First Nations methodologies of telling stories now in non-black work, which is not a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. Don't tell black stories. But I think the idea, just don't, forever. That's where I stand on that, and just so everyone's clear. But I think that that's our voice. Our voice is about First Nations communities and mobs and stories. That's our theatrical voice to the world. That's what Australia represents, the oldest continuing storytellers in the world. How small are we making ourselves to hide stuff? Can you imagine actually what it means if we open that up and understand the centering of that practice is and the benefit is for everyone, for every playwright? Rather than go, no, we need to hide and shame, compartmentalise and box it over here, for fuck's sake. And then slightly let it in because I can't process my guilt, rather than going, no. It's the centre. It's what it is, right? That's actually who we are. That's what our identity is here on these lands. And really giving space to that. And that's what I really hope that the next 30 years is about in theatre here. I really think we see it become incredibly black. And then also everyone else who I think stories are also undervalued and not heard and not represented. Mainly because we're still dealing with that paradigm. And I think if we actually dealt with that paradigm, everyone else would be a lot more welcome.
Just hearing you speak made me think too that I think often equity and inclusion, it can be a fine tipping point sometimes. There is a subconscious bias where they're used concessionally, and it's just not helpful, I don't think.
Yeah. Obviously, I agree with that. So that's here. That's what we're doing. And then within that, I think we just need all these branches of just intersectionality in all different ways. And I think people of all different intersections being able to tell whatever story they want that has a strong emotional engine, rather than when I'm doing these grants for these young people to be able to tell their stories, having to tick all the boxes to include people, rather than like what they're actually passionate about and what they want to share. Love ticking the boxes so that then I can get them to do that, but it's ridiculous. I hope we get to a point where we can just have the intersectionality and people can tell good stories because they're good, and they usually are good because those people are intersectional and diverse. So
Yep, agreed to that and that all together. And I think to help make that and that a reality, I think we need to support the pipeline of new leaders and supporting them. And I think it's hard. I think that we're at a real risk of losing a cohort of change-making, selfless leaders unless we can figure out how to support them better. Like, we talk about this all the time. It's no joke. It's no joke.
Just like, could I ask a question? What is the pipeline for someone who doesn't come from like a leader? How do you become a leader to become a company? To become an artistic director of a company? Like,
Listen,
yeah.
I think Who knows? And I'm also in the middle of that. I've been actually through multiple of those processes. I just went through that process with QT, and I'm about to go through that process again with my own org. And so,
because I totally agree.
And I don't think for me, I don't think leaders. I think leaders are made, but I think leaders are born. I think that leadership, when you're a leader, it's not more important than any other role. It's just a role in which you play in the system. And there's something about you that means that you're willing to see all of the pieces. You can clearly see everything, and you understand what Wesley said yesterday, which was you don't have to have the best idea, but you can recognise the best idea. You're a person who listens deeply and can understand the collective responsibility, and then you're the person who will go first. You're the person who will go first, led by all of that information, willing to step out into the bravery and do the thing. And doing that is an incredibly vulnerable task. Being the person that goes, the unknown is there, and we must walk towards it. Right? That's the skill. And that's why we don't have many leaders, because doing fucking that, real hard. Really, really hard. And I think that... you yourself are an incredible young leader, and I think that I've watched you do that many, many times, right? And I think that it's about, there needs to be much better pipelines and not just like some of those terrible leadership, oh my God. But actually fundamentally, I think the number one thing that actually meant that I know that I can speak for myself that I got here was because of my peers, because of the other leaders like Courtney. Like if I couldn't have called Courtney over the past 5 years crying all of the time, I'd be in real trouble. And because you've got people in leadership who hold you through that, who you've got the key people, and I can speak to all of the key people at a time that you could have lost Amy Sol from the industry many, many years ago. When I first graduated from acting school, I wasn't in with Mugs here, and I didn't have any community here. I would only just moved to Sydney, and I'm from freaking Foster. And I put in for Balnaves, and I didn't get an interview, and I didn't get an email back. And I went, right, and my husband, hi Gareth, also went, why don't you just message them? And so I sent a very stern email to Lou Goff being like, what the hell, like just communicate. Why don't you just communicate to me? And Lou was one of the first women who went, oh my God, hi, you're a person and you're a great human and we don't want to lose you from the sector. And was like, I'll be here for you. And then did. And then Lou came and saw all of my work and stood by me and was there. And then there was, the other people that then stood by me and then Rach. And I think it's that. But
It's radical support, I think. And we talk about this all the time. I think, I don't know that a cookie cutter formula for a pathway is the vibe. I think that each cultural institution needs a different approach because of what they're trying to do. And I think, I think LeBois was probably ready to take a chance on me because I didn't have an artistic director for 2 years. And I'm really lucky that we went through it at the same time, really. But I do feel worried because I can see that some of our other colleagues aren't staying. And that makes me feel very worried.
it's scary.
It's really scary, I think, because I definitely came up at a time where, I had to move from Brisbane to Sydney because there was just no opportunity for Asian faces there at all, like none. And then I witnessed a real watershed moment, particularly for Asian Australian writing with, Blue Bone, Single Asian Female and a bunch of other amazing Asian Australian works that came out at that time. But that's starting to dwindle a little bit in a way. And I think that there's definitely, we've lived through it. There's been a strong cohort of people who would have been ready to step into roles like this, not just as artistic directors, but as executive directors, senior producers, on boards, all of that. And you need lots of people in all of those positions to make the shift. You just can't have one. It's like so much. And that's where you get that's why people leave, because they're just there on their own. And I think we're seeing it now that a lot of our dear friends are leaving.
Courtney, could I ask you to speak to being a woman who has a child, children,
Two.
because I think one of the things we're not talking about too is that there is menopause and there is childbirth, and both these things have an effect on how people view themselves and also how the optics of how it's viewed by the industry. And I think if you did statistics of the amount of people who are in leadership positions in the arts or the theatre, creative leadership positions who have children, I think you'd find it's pretty lean. And I'm just wondering if you could talk to your experience and also about people who are fronting up to your company who do have children or are going through menopause, and whether that's part of the conversation.
Always. I think that one of the first conversations that I had, this is before I even knew that being an artistic director could be in my desire line. I was like, oh, that's for people who aren't like me. Oh, that's not for me. Like, I don't know how to do that. I would never be welcome in spaces like that. I remember associate directing on a work with a director who did have children, who said to me, you cannot run a company and have children. But that is a narrative that she had been led to believe. It wasn't like, you can't, it was like, it's not possible. It's not possible. And she also said to me, you also can't direct more than one show a year. It's too hard. And I was like, I had just had my first child, and I was like, my life's over. But I think that for me, I say this, you don't have to have children. Like, that's not a thing that you have to have. It's something that I wanted, and it's something that is important to me. But there's lots of ways, like it's challenging whether you have children or not. There's lots of different things that make it challenging. I think that for those people who want to have a family and are in the process of that, I think you mustn't listen to that. You mustn't listen to people who say it's too hard, because it's really easy to absorb that narrative. And I think that the best thing that I did to be able to overcome that is one of the most challenging things that I did in my life was I got back. I used to be an actor, so I got back on stage 7 weeks after having my first baby, not realising. I committed to that before I understood anything about recovering from birth. But I think it was so hard, and I think that first 2 weeks after having Bobby, I was like, how does anyone work after having a child? How? It's like, it's not built for this. It's late nights. It's hard enough to have like any meaningful relationship outside of the team that you're building a work with, let alone being responsible for keeping another human alive. But I think like learning how to be a parent, and also kind of like, and around that time I had just started to dip my toe into directing and story development. So I was like learning a whole new element of my craft whilst trying to figure out how to be a parent and trying to figure out how those things could possibly live together. And I think because I made it so hard for myself unnecessarily so early on, it set me up to be able to kind of take on anything. Like, I feel like I have just been, like, it's been so challenging that my shoulders are a lot broader now. But I think if I had waited, I think it would have been harder. Like, if I had waited until Bobby was a year old, I think it might have been harder for me to jump back in, probably.
Can I just also say that there is now going to be a generation of women that have kids because of Courtney? Like, the amount of times I'm in conversations and go, yeah, but Courtney did it. So many more babies.
You should be, but this is it. Like, we were just having this conversation before. I think that you know, it's hard, but like, you know, and actually I make it a point to try and collaborate with people who have caring responsibilities, whether it's for children or family members or whatever, like people who have, like, to show that it's possible. Like, it's important to like pressure test and trial models of making work where the work is still excellent. You're still throwing everything that you have behind the work to make sure that it reaches its heights in the period of time that Australia's decided to, you know, make work, 4 weeks of rehearsals or whatever it is, but still be able to continue to serve those areas of your life that need to be served after the show closes. Like, I think that's, That's critical.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first experiences I had, I was like, I'm breastfeeding. Where can I do that? They're like in the bathroom. I'm like, I'm not feeding my baby in the bathroom. Like surely there's like a corner of a room that I could just put a curtain up, And so I think figuring out what are those simple changes that just make it, and they can thrive, then the work,
Because I do worry about the attrition of people, artists we lose from the industry who are, particularly women who are often caring for children, and then often caring for their parents.
Yes.
So there is a binary that usually women are doing the caring, and I think I suppose I'm just wondering, are those conversations starting to be a part of how artistic leaders talk to each other in their consideration?
I don't think enough. I think that unless it's your experience, it's hard to remember it's a thing.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the biggest things that we can all do as a sector is like actively continue to try and keep people in the industry, because I think it's easy. It shouldn't be on you. It's really hard for it to be on you to remember to keep pushing yourself into the industry and keep reminding people that you're there. I remember that when I was pregnant with my second baby, I had been offered a really amazing position inside a company, and a person semi-high up in that organisation said to the artistic director at the time, "Oh, do you think Courtney will be able to do that, because do you know that she's pregnant?" And I was like, when I found that out, like my heart stopped. I was like, "Oh no, don't I get a say in that? Like I've just done it. Like I'm sure I can do it. I can figure it out." But like feeling like all of a sudden, it's hard to stay. It's hard. It can be hard to like stay active in those decisions anyway. But like to feel like that decision making is being taken away from you, that's really, really difficult. And so I make sure that we're asking people who have all of that first, and letting them know early on. Right, I know that that's a thing that you're gonna have to negotiate around. Let me help you with that. If it becomes too hard, let's have a conversation early, because there's always a solution. Always.
And
yeah.
In my generation, getting that questioning about whether Courtney could do it, that was not a gasp moment. That would have been an of course moment for my generation.
Yeah.
I think it's also not to. I think it's because I think this exists in black space, but it exists very different in black space, right? Like when I started Ilbidgery, which was incredibly full on. I said off the cuff to Ray once, I don't know, something about a baby. And she went, "Are you going to have a baby? You should have a baby. We need an Ilbidgery baby." And then when I was working on Tracker, Rach was directing Ari and I was co-writing with Urs. And Urs turned to me and was like, "I remember when I was in this room and I was the one Rach was directing and she had Ari on her arm." Like we've been doing it in theatre spaces for a really long time. Like we see it in community, right? And that's how you should raise children. Like I don't intend to raise my children. I hope Courtney raises my children. It's a collective responsibility. If I have a baby, we've all got to bring it up.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
This has gone so quickly, but I did want to end on a positive note, and we'll take some questions. So I'd ask you if you could economically talk about possibly a time or a program or an opportunity that your identity intersected with that was positive in terms of programming, reviewing, marketing, just how you've been represented, that you thought that gave you hope and made you feel good and made you think that was a step in the right direction, that was a good, empowering thing.
Maybe this is also a real privilege of a generational thing. I think that's all my experience.
Wow.
I think that's, not that I don't have to fight for it, but actually I think it's all my experience. I don't think there has been a single project that hasn't centered my identity or who I am or how I move through space, and it has always been pretty positive.
Has there been
overall.
A highlight?
For me, probably the one that I mentioned before, which was like creating black in the room, with those women, which wasn't about my identity. It was about giving space to other Black women.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough of it. Like, there's just not enough, like, Black women playwrights getting to take up that space. And so I think for me that was the joy of watching these women thrive. And I remember I directed Emu in the Sun, which was Phoebe Greener's work, and Phoebe is a phenomenal writer who hasn't been programmed on a main stage outside of Black in the Room and Melbourne Theatre Company, which I think is abhorrent and ridiculous. And I remember on opening night of that show, all of her community came down from Mariba, and her mum was there, auntie and uncle all came in, and everyone was there, and she was just glowing. And so watching Black women stand in their strength, surrounded by their community, telling the story that they want to tell, how they want to tell it on the biggest stages, I'm like, it's that. Like, that for me, I was like, this is it. Yeah.
Lanika?
Well, for me, I'm still quite baby. I know it doesn't feel like I'm baby. I feel like I'm dying, but I am still quite baby in this industry, in that I haven't had like a main stage play yet. Like, so most of my opportunities, I have found that I've been trudging to get people to program things, and it's really only because I've created my own opportunities because in the indie sector, you're not getting development to be able to actually put a work on. You're having to get a grant to get a development for you to gather a few people that you like to try and make something happen, to then pitch to a company to put on in an independent show where they'll give you no money, you'll pay venue hire, and you will produce the whole show essentially. So I don't feel like I've had a programming highlight yet. I feel like I've programmed myself and the people I love that I think are great and are making new work. So what I would say is that I like that people are starting to listen. That's awesome. And hopefully I will have a programming highlight. But all of the work I've done has been with young queer people of all different backgrounds, all different intersections. And that's the work I love. I love when things come up in the room where they're like, oh, I need this because of this, and we can find a way to make that happen. So I think, all of the projects that I've worked with, but probably young queer people in the Monologue Collective was pretty awesome because they got their work published by a company and it's in a book and it's in schools in New South Wales. I just think like that's crazy to me that a 15-year-old can have like a play in a school. I just think that's like so awesome. So yeah.
Amazing. I think for me, probably being a part of the Directors Initiative that was a collaboration with Contemporary Asian Australian Performance at Sydney Theatre Company was the thing that changed my life, I think. And I think for me, I think it's really, really easy for people who come from historically marginalised communities to see themselves as perpetually emerging because the opportunities that are available to us is at that level, and there's not really much more beyond that. There's a lot of those opportunities, and so I think that can be hard to then continue to grow as an artist when you're the message back to you is that you're at this level, you're emerging, you're starting. Whereas that opportunity, I think as a model for a pathway, it was like long form, deep investment, and it continued to grow with the cohort. And I think, Kenneth Moraletta, Tasnim Hossain, Jen Rani came from that cohort, and I think to see those leaders now doing what they're doing is amazing, and I think that's how that changed my life for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your honesty and your hearts and your brains. It's been incredible. We are going to carve out a very small amount of time for some questions. When workshopping contemporary Australian Asian plays in schools, how would you navigate cultural sensitivity with students from a range of Asian and non-Asian backgrounds?
That is such a great question. I think that there's just I think it's just really important how you lens that in a learning environment. I think sometimes, having worked a lot in schools and worked a lot with drama educators, I think there can be really good intent, but also just enough trepidation that sometimes there's missed opportunities to have the conversations that need to be had early on to be able to like set the process up to be able to potentially do something like that. I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to like locate yourself inside that process, like have the conversation. If you're the facilitator as the educator, like being really aware of what intersections you're bringing into the room, like what is your cultural lineage, and being able to speak to that and then invite that conversation, you know, get the students and the young people that you're working with to have practice at doing that. Then you can start to have conversations about perspectives that aren't your own, in a way that's not, oh, them over there, they, you know, that's how they, you know, interact in family dynamics and speak to their mother like that. You know, I think that's part of it. It's really difficult. I think that probably, you know, we're at a time where we need to move more rapidly into the space of cultural safety and away from cultural competency. And I think that when we start to do that more and more, we can have conversations like this that are driving towards social cohesion and understanding, rather than where we are the majority, that is other. We don't need to acknowledge this or that about ourselves because it's a given, whereas that needs to be interrogated because it's so different to what we are. So I think that when you do that, when you like deeply understand what it is that makes up the way that you view the world, and you name that and put that in the room at the beginning, then we're kind of in a territory where we can start to talk about cultural safety rather than cultural competence, which is, oh, I understand that that's a culture. That is cultural. I'm not cultural because, you know, I'm not diverse. I think that, yeah, it's really difficult though.
That's a good question too. Thank you. It's going to come up any minute now, 43, 42. Power is amplified through social structures and systems. To make lasting change in this industry, what system would you break and rebuild if you could?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Listen, and I think that because this conversation is around feminism, right? And I think, like, and obviously we've been talking a lot about intersectional feminism, because Court and I are on the panel, and Lanika as well. So the trickle-down effect does happen, but it happens in a way where it's like everyone is affected by oppression, right? Everyone is affected by oppression, including cis white guys, right? I love many of them, too much sometimes. I have my own, I married him. And it affects everyone. It hurts everyone. Like what I spoke to before, where like colonialism and the impacts of colonialism directly impacts the art we can make, because it impedes the stories we can tell and how we can show up honestly. And so like a lot of the systems that need to be looked at, I don't think about tearing down systems all of the time. Because I don't think it's about tearing them down. I think it's about, for me, Garyella and truth-telling, this idea of like speaking truth and shifting things through truth. It's about moving things and shifting things to what has already been here, right? We've been existing on these lands since time immemorial, and we have ways of being and doing. And everyone, like you were saying, Court, has their own cultural context that they bring into space. And it's actually about building those things collectively together, rather than just tearing things down and going, oh, well, what have we got now? It's about collectively building and shifting the things. Yeah, that's what I think it is.
I would say more. I think that I agree with you of like leading with truth, but also organisations within the industry leading with transparency of how it actually works to get work made. And so like you should be able to Google, to me, I think you should be able to Google, I want to be a senior producer at a theatre company, and there should be a multitude of information, not pathways, because everyone's pathway is different, especially with lived experience, but a multitude of ways that you can get to that spot. Whereas we sit in these rooms and we chat, and sometimes you just feel hopeless of like, oh, I still don't know how that person got to where they got today. Like, I have no idea, and I don't know where to go next. So my thing would be that we need to understand what the systems are in order to be able to even infiltrate them as emerging artists.
Actually, that's a really good point. One thing that I just wanted to say on the lack of transparency in this industry is ridiculous. Right? I will be transparent. If you come up to me and you want to know anything, I will tell you everything from every organisation, and every organisation knows I will talk, because I think transparency is really, really important. And fundamentally, one of the things that I wanted to say when I was here was everyone keeps talking about writing their first draft. And I'm like, very rarely do companies program off a draft. Very rarely do companies program off a written script. They program off an idea. Like, you need to have a relationship with the new work department. How do playwrights not know this? How are you on panels in here and still thinking that that's the model? It's not. You need to get commissioned. You need to go and have conversations. And it's just that lack of transparency. You're 100% spot on.
That's great. I'm glad you all know that now. That's a good bit of information.
It's important. This is your career.
I think it's also how you spoke about leadership earlier on, and how I think because of the way his story has worked, it has been predominantly a male paradigm, and I think that transparency still isn't a natural part of leadership, particularly in our industry, and I think it's because of that restraint and scarcity and fear. But I'm such a fan of advocating for transparency. I think it's good for everyone, and I actually think it saves time in the end. I think people are terrified about what time it's going to take them. I'm a bit alarmed that the colour of the numbers has gone red. So does that mean we are... Yeah, okay. I'm sorry we didn't leave enough time for questions. But you can, if you see people in the foyer, I'm sure you're welcome to approach them. Thanks for coming along, and I'd like you to thank our lovely panellists.